Hey, thanks for stopping by Waxing About Westworld. This is a channel that's dedicated to doing nothing but dissecting the living hell out of HBO's fantastic new series, WestWorld. I am overly analytical, and today I really want to dive into something a little unconventional, and that's the intro. The intro is so packed full, and I'm really excited to dive right into it and really start to discuss and dissect everything piece by piece. So as the intro rolls into, we can actually see we are first greeted with this desolate landscape that looks like white sand desert. But as the light moves in, the contours become more pronounced. We see what would be a sand dune or a ripple effect in sand, but that actually may be something more. It actually ends up revealing to be like a synthetic tissue. I love what this is doing right here, like right out of the gate. It is establishing that we're about to enter a world where things are not what they might seem at first. There is a theme that starts here and it goes all the way through the rest of the intro, and that is establishing the relationship between the natural world and the synthetic by drawing parallels between the two. We know we're going to be entering into a world where androids, or hosts as they're referred to in the show, are very lifelike, that they have broken the uncanny valley to the point where people interact with them as if they were flesh and blood. This preps the mind for immersion into the amazing world that they have constructed. Now, just 7 seconds in, the camera reveals to us more pronounced features, and every time I see this, I think of seeing an animal's remains in the desert. The intro is saying that it is going to be a harsh and unforgiving environment, and one better be on guard. At the 8 second mark, the scene changes completely, and it displays a robotic arm creating the strings of a piano. The soft, smooth, natural lines of the previous scene have been replaced by hard, straight, and right angles, with the movement of the arm coming at the camera. And with the strings pulling the eye past the robotic arm, I am instantly torn between where my focus is supposed to be. What I am also getting out of this is establishing that this world is made by machines. When I go into the breakdown of episode 1, I will throw into a theory that I have about what I think this very scene in the intro is actually saying about the entirety of Westworld as a whole. 13 second mark, the true functionality of the robot arm is revealed. This is the device that is responsible for constructing the hosts. However, I feel that it is not the most important part of the scene. I see the grace, the precision, and the elegance of what is being created. Again, the intro is prepping us for what we're about to see, and this scene says that everything in the show and in reality of Westworld has been thought out. There is a deceptive elegance that runs just under the skin that you may not see. Honestly, I haven't watched a show that comes across as so methodically planned out. The attention to detail and how nothing is done just to do it. Everything means something where it has a purpose. There is no wasted attention going on in Westworld at all. Now, I haven't mentioned the music that is playing until now because I feel that the imagery at marker 16 seconds blends it together very, very well. The music is beautiful, it's powerful, moving, simple yet complicated, as the piece goes on and progresses. This is exactly what we're seeing here. The previous scene showed us some complexity with what it was creating. Here we get to see synthetic bones complete with moving joints, ligaments being attached, just like they would be in the human body. The visuals again are smooth, elegant, and graceful. I feel as though I am being softly subdued or lulled into a sense of comfort, sort of like some message is saying, come to Westworld and relax, have a good time, everything is fine. And as soon as I start to hit that spot, there is a bright underlight that illuminates the joint. It pulls the eye to the right of the screen, and it seems just like when my eye gets there, the camera pulls back to reveal what it had been working on. Now, the horse reveal at 18 seconds took my breath away when I first saw it. What I find to be the most important bit of information is the use of light and shadow. The underside of the horse is lit with a hard light giving way to hard shadows with very crisp lines of demarcation, saying that there is light in this universe, but please don't forget that there is a serious dark side to it as well. I also want to take a moment to highlight that the way this is shot is so clever. My eye is constantly being pulled to the center of the frame, allowing the dark to envelop the rest of the frame. However, the robot arms that are just outside of center and cloaked in darkness is there to remind me that what I may see and may look familiar, but it is still very much synthetic. As I have watched this show, I find myself constantly bouncing between the reality that they are selling us as a guest and the reality that is Westworld as a whole. This is one of those concepts that gives this show such a strong foundation. We, the watchers of the show, are also experiencing the same type of schism that a patron of WestWorld would feel when they arrive. Wanting to buy into the illusion, but struggling with the remembrance of it's all fake. This shot of the horse with the robotic arms just out of center encapsulate that struggle. It is so well thought out and so beautifully executed. At 26 seconds, we're given a massive amount of information. This scene is saying that the creators of the park were so driven to replicate the human form and function that they have taken no shortcuts. As we see the eye snap into frame all the tiny interwoven strands of tissue that are placed one by one. I have to say that the artists that worked on this eye were amazing. They didn't leave a single detail out. This is how the human eye actually looks when you get really, really close to it. The iris is essentially built how it is here. They took the human form and function, reverse engineered them, and then retrofitted it into their construction technology. It's absolutely brilliant. I want to take a moment to look at the color palette of the eye. Notice all of the different techniques used, the highlights, the shimmer, the shadow, hell, even the dithering between the sclera and the iris is masterfully done. Now, I really hope that this show is nominated for some awards, because the amount of work, thought, and creativity that went into this really needs to be recognized and rewarded. So fingers crossed for every person who worked on the visuals here that their efforts will be rewarded. Just 1 second later now, we see that the eye that was just being built has a reflection of the landscape on it. This is where we're introduced to the main character of the story, that is WestWorld itself. It also establishes a conflict. This host is going to be sent out into the harsh and brutal landscapes of the desert, and done so very coldly, essentially throwing them out to the wolves. After we see the reflection of the landscape, the camera cuts to a top-down perspective of the eye. Now here is where the intro again sets the stage for us. When I look at this eye, I now cannot tell if it is an actual human eye or a fabricated eye. There are no context clues pushing me one way or the other. The great deception of WestWorld is now been established. Also, just as a side note here, I will say that I absolutely love the context of looking at an eye that isn't completely in focus. We then see the iris start to move to regulate the amount of incoming light, and also in an attempt to gain focus. Focus and vision will be dominant themes for a couple of the characters coming up inside of WestWorld. At 30 seconds, we are giving another shot that looks familiar, but how it is familiar is different than the first time that they had done this. Now that we are comfortable with the concept that the hosts are built with the same anatomical principles as humans, and basically how it is done, we have started to become accepting of this world. Now that we aren't so shocked over the imagery of what we normally don't see because it's hidden by skin, it gives us a moment to appreciate the elegance again of the movement, of the design, and of the construction of the hosts. However, just as that comfort started to set in, we are ripped away from it yet again and shown that it is working on a hand. Normally, looking at a skeleton hand would invoke some sort of negative emotion or reaction for a split second. I do get that visceral response at seeing basically a hand with no skin on it. However, as it moves, the movement is what becomes the force that draws a line between the unfamiliar and the familiar. This was such a fantastic choice. The music that we're hearing and being played essentially by the robot, but being played back in a very human way. They could have easily put in an awful Pico speaker and let all that tinny distortion give us all a headache. But instead, they're making music how we do. Also, the lines and focus to the horizon is repeated a lot in this intro, and it's such a great thing to see. My eye is encouraged to explore all that is in the front of me, and it tempts me to look farther out, to go farther into the background, to look past what is being presented to me right up front, perhaps pulling me farther away from the center of the park. Now, the word breathless instantly snaps into my head at the 37 mark. Again, the shot is lit in the center, pulling the eye to focus on the two hosts. The shadow obfuscates the robots pulling the strings, so to speak. Now, the light between the two hosts is more intense in the chest area, and between the lighting and how the hosts are holding one another, I get an odd sense of comfort and familiarity at watching an act that is very much human. I don't oftentimes think of robots having sex or falling in love. Those are, for at least have been, solely human characteristics, but here we are shown that that may no longer be the case. The lines between synthetic and natural are blurring ever more. Now, as the intro rolls forward, we are now watching it flex a little bit of its muscle. We see two hands now playing the piano, and then we get a close-up of the two hosts that are intertwined. In what almost feels like an unnerving sense of self-awareness on the part of the intro, we are removed from thinking about the hosts and the replication of human behaviors and actions by seeing the eye reflect the desert again. And I will get into that here in a little bit coming up. Around 51 seconds, the tone of the intro completely changes. The same robotic arm that we watch construct beautiful human forms has more to it than that. It can also make weapons. This feels so much like a turning of the blade. This is the ice bucket moment. This is blatantly screaming out, don't forget, there is serious danger here as we see it fabricating the cylinder of the revolver. There is no mistaking this for anything other than a gun. Again, ripped out of the comfortable human moment that being held at gunpoint. It's like driving down the road at 55 miles an hour just on a nice lazy stroll on a beautiful day, and then all of a sudden full stop with a gun pointed at your face. It is just so shocking and just so sobering. Not only does this intro change tonally right here, it also changes musically. The music starts to become more complicated, more intense, and yet it will throw in the hauntingly familiar melody now and then, but it is overlaid on top of a very complex piece of music writing underneath. As the music gets more complex, I feel like I am reaching out for that familiar melody just to give me a sense of familiarity, something to base myself off of, like a cool glass of water on a very hot day. The time between the music and the visuals has been totally on point for 56 seconds so far, but now they're just showing off. This music is intensifying, and with that, we are again greeted with a sobering reminder of danger. But now the gun is being held onto by a hand. To me, this says power and focus can be wielded by anyone, regardless of what they choose to do with it. It requires a commitment, so you better hold on. Around the 1 minute mark, we are shown a very powerful image and is delivered in a 1-2 style punch. At first, the face is easily made out as our eye starts to scan and we see the face and admire how beautiful it looks. The camera keeps giving us more data, whether we like it or not. And then it forces us to confront our own mortality. This place is dangerous. It is at a bare minimum dangerous just for the hosts, but it is also telling us that this is not just the hosts that are at risk, it is for the newcomers as well. We're going to have to confront some preconceived notions about our own humanity and our consciousness and what life really is. If we want to be completely seduced by WestWorld, we have to let those preconceived notions die and fall away. Here is my second all-time favorite scene in this intro. The woman atop the horse that was being constructed earlier. I again want to point out the masterful use of darkness and light here. We see that the horse is white and so is the head of the host. However, her head is separated from the horse by her black dress. To me, this says that the self-aware, the sentient, the thinking machine will always ride above and never touch with the device that they command. There will always be a separation. I also want to take a second and bring attention to a hidden line in this shot. If we look at how it is framed, we can see that there is a diagonal line that runs from the bottom left of the frame to the upper right part of the frame, and the horse and the rider smooth out the hard lines of the machine and making a call to the rolling dunes of the desert landscape that we had saw earlier. As this intro goes on, it works very hard to keep a tight, consistent, encompassing narrative. In this shot alone, we see all the major players so far. The host, the machines that created it, the delicate balance of nature versus the synthetic, and the desert landscape of WestWorld. Now at 1 minute 5 seconds, this is where I got my first clue as to what was going to happen in the show. The host's hands start to pull away from the player piano. The host no longer has to tell the player piano what to do. It has been given its own code to run, and now the host is free to do whatever it wants. It can sit back and enjoy the music, it can wander out of the room, it can make coffee, or it can begin to construct a very devious and clever plot to overthrow humanity. Machines have created other machines that they have also breathed life into and given a functionality of their own. That is exactly how this whole thing is going to go. Humans created the machines to create the machines that created machines, and now they are free to do whatever their artificial heart desires. Now, if I have not demonstrated to you yet just how far down a rabbit hole I am willing to go, I want to mention what happens around the 1 minute and 9 second mark. We see a player piano scroll start to roll by. Here we see old technology that eventually gave birth to the very technology that made the hosts possible. Here is another subtle conflict that is between old or antiquated technology versus modern technology. They are forever linked and forced to dance together, no matter how little one may think it has to do with the other. This comes up again in episode 1. Now, if I tilt my head just a little bit to the left, I can see more rolling desert landscapes in the pattern of the notes, revealing that WestWorld, the character, has woven itself tightly into everything. Now, for the last time, we'll be given another conflict in this intro. We can now see the entire piano, but it doesn't quite look like a normal player piano. The wood panels that hide the mechanics have been removed. Essentially, the organic shell has been peeled back to show the world the marvel of its design and its construction. No matter how organic something may look in WestWorld, there is always mechanics driving it just under the surface. At around the 1 minute 16 mark, more information is given to us as to the construction of the hosts. We see the rig where the hosts will be created, and the device that they are showing instantly makes us fill in the gaps. We can see that there are connection points for the limbs and the head. We can easily see a human form inside of this ring, but it's obviously not there. It is another subtle deception, and this time it is really saying, I am in control. Look, I can make you envision a person when there isn't really one there to begin with. I have a feeling that the world of WestWorld will always be in control, but it will always do so in a way that will make the observer and the newcomers believe that it was a conscious decision on their part that was made out of their own free will. However, it was pulling the strings to make it happen the entire time, and we are and will be completely fooled. At 1 minute 18 seconds is my most favorite part of the intro. Whoever conceptualized this was an absolute genius. We see the eye with a reflection of the landscape in it again. However, this time it is a much different message in what it's trying to convey. We see detail and color for the first time in this reflection. So as we look upon it more, it will be revealed to the observer. However, there is a sinister backbite that comes with this. The illusion and immersion of WestWorld can be so intoxicating that I can see how someone would completely fall into the abyss of fantasy and get swallowed up. I am also stymied when I see the lines that are in the iris that sync up with the lines in the landscape, further blurring the line between synthetic and natural. I simply just can't get over this shot. Every time I see it, I feel inundated by more information and more hidden meanings. It is beautifully intense and seductive. I am reminded of Friedrich Nietzsche with his famous abyss line from his book Beyond Good and Evil, when he wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into the abyssal also gazes back at you." As I stare in the amazement of the eye of the WestWorld, it is staring right back at me. As we start to get to the end of the intro, we can now see that there is a host mounted on the fabrication rig and is being lowered into a vat of this mysterious liquid. I think it was so smart of them to use this imagery of the fabrication of the host, because the white fluid that we see reminds us of the white fluid that was in androids in the movies Alien and Aliens. It is almost a way of giving validity to the area of technology that they're using here. Another instance that we are given some tiny bit of familiarity amongst the unfamiliar to make us a little bit more comfortable. The music starts to spiral downward, leading the ear downward, and the host is also being lowered, pulling our eyes downward into the vat as well. Finally, we see the host consumed completely by the fabrication fluid. It is here that we also get a good look at the host. Now, here's where I'm going to share a theory that I have about WestWorld that I have so far. This host's face bears a resemblance to Yul Brynner, the man who originally starred in the WestWorld movie years ago. I think we might be dealing with 3 separate timelines in this show, and one of them is a continuation of where the original movie had left off. They make reference to the last catastrophic failure we had was over 30 years ago. It just so happens that the WestWorld movie is a little over 30 years old, and I guess calling it a catastrophic failure is a way of putting it mildly. So I think the 2 universes, the original movie universe and this series, exist on one of the 3 timelines. At 1 minute 31 seconds, the music ends with a low chord being sustained as we see a faint image of an eye in the background. This was chilling for me. The note instills a sense of vibration in my chest, a psychological response to a stimuli. It has essentially demonstrated to me again that WestWorld is in control of everything that happens in this universe. It pushed the button, I reacted. It almost couldn't be more of a red flag if it actually tried. Plus the eye is just barely noticeable, yet unblinking, and is locked looking straight at us. WestWorld will always be watching. So that was my breakdown of the WestWorld intro. I mentioned it at the beginning of this intro. It was packed full of data. Would you believe over 5 pages of notes were used for just 1 minute and 43 seconds of video? I would be very interested in hearing your input as well. I enjoy having a good back and forth with creative and interpretive thought. So please, if you have interpreted anything differently from what I have, I would love to hear about it. Did you catch something that I didn't? Please share that with me in the comments below, and I am very anxious to actually start to see how this world starts to unpack. And with that, I'm going to wake up in 3, 2,